all very tight, and those three teams have been extremely positive this year. Those are the three good news stories from the Rugby Championship. But unfortunately, where there is positivity, there must also be negativity. Such is the way of sport, and one side had to take the brunt of it this year, and that was the Pumas, who went 0-6 as they have done before once or twice, and it's the second time ever that they've managed to accumulate no log points, no losing bonus points. They did that in 2017 as well, right? Which was obviously not good either. But this one was, like, it was particularly
it's funny,
bad.
2017, isn't that bang smack in the middle of a World Cup cycle again?
Correct.
Yes.
And that's true, and let's not gloss over it. That's been how the Pumas have operated forever. They have saved their best for World Cup years, and this was a very, very difficult tour for them. First of all, they had to be in this biosecure bubble the whole time.
Yeah. South Africa, they had to quarantine going into South Africa, play 2 games there, go to Australia, quarantine for a bit there. Then play all the games against the top 3 teams in the world currently.
Hotel room stuff, just in countries, first and foremost, that don't even speak their primary language. Yeah. Away from their families for such a large period. And then it just wasn't working for them, and they were noticeably frustrated. I mean, last year their defence was on top of clunky enough offences in New Zealand and Australia. And they got a great win, a historic win. I think whatever happens to the Ledesma reign, he'll always have that. That'll always be factored in, just how impressive they were on that day. Yeah. But they probably naively came into this championship thinking that they could replicate some of those performances, and it was never going to happen. Yeah. And they
came in having done that to Wales, like development Wales at the beginning.
Yeah,
they got a draw and they got a win against that team.
It's right, but I mean, you looking back on that June series, I mean, the game that you might have taken more out of was that Romania game where they were frustrated and couldn't do anything with the ball. And Romania were just like, no, I mean, we're not going to attack you. We can't really attack anyway. Yeah. You're just going to hold the fort and see what you can do. And the answer was precious little for large periods of that game. And they only got away with a 1-score win over Romania in Bucharest. Yeah. And that was a decent indication of just how far behind the team was with the ball. Yeah. Wales matched up more favourably to them because Wales don't have a great kicking game and try to run
attack.
The ball.
Yeah. You play as a defence especially when they're young and naive.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. They didn't have the streetwise ability to outplay them, whereas teams like New Zealand did, and they resolved to just only defend in those initial games against New Zealand, and it was crazy. Ended up losing 39-0 because of it. And
but 39-0, as we said at the time, like, impressive considering you spend like 70 minutes of game time defending your try line. Like, that's never going to end positively on the scoreboard, and when you're against the All Blacks, you should probably be shipping 80 for doing something like that. But they still defend pretty well at times. Their set piece can be very good, even though they lost their primary props. That was a more chopping and changing like that. Their primary props were in and then they were out. And
Gomez Kadea and Tatus Shaparo, who are very good scrummagers, the two of them.
But then, like, they found by force halfway through the thing, like, Sanchez went out with an injury and their offense was just doing nothing, and so they kind of threw the book out and they threw Carreras in there at 10. They kind of made it a revamped look to it, and they did try to run the ball a little bit more. They were noticeably way behind their opponents in all of those
that's
games.
That's the sum of what you'd say. I mean, it's a very, like, I think we mentioned earlier on the show just how hard it is to adjust against 3 of the best sides in the world jostling with each other for position. If you're a step behind, you're very quickly just it's unrelenting. Yeah, the difficulty of the standard, and they tried, like, there was no developing an offense midway through this campaign, and even the attempts that they made, I didn't think it was great. But the question is, like first of all, like, they play on the emotional edge to a massive extent, even more so than they used to, and their penalty count has exploded, and their dumb penalties as well. Yeah. These needless, like, constant dizzying,
the foot trip from Kramer, the body check post whistle, that kind of stuff, as well as the repeated taking down of the jumper in the air. Like,
it's all kinds of goofy cheap shot penalties that they've been coming up with when they're a little bit behind, a little bit tired, and their defence isn't working that well for them. Married with the lack of
incision on offense.
Yeah, it just made for an extremely ugly picture, and I think there's a lot of. I've been following sort of tangentially the fan reaction from Argentina fans, and they're a little distraught at what they're seeing. True. Like, they used to look at this team even when they were struggling in this championship, and there'd be 2 or 3 outstanding highlights per game. I think of Del Guy like turning the All Black defence inside and out in Eden Park and making a game of that. Even if though they ended up losing that game by a bit, it was just so much more positive. There was so much more positive to reflect on.
And more pretty to look at. They have some great runners out wide, and they're like, personnel wise, the back line looks good on paper, but it's just when you look at it on pitch, it doesn't look good at all.
No.
So that's the question then for the coaches, like, is the sum of the parts greater than the team right now? And if so, why? Because that's the problem.
The question, the real burning question about them is the moment is just how much of this malaise do you chalk up to mid-World Cup cycle, the quarantine situation being absolutely terrible, the quality of their opponents. Like, would you be confident that they can arrest all of that, put things together, starting with this off-season, and then end up right come World Cup year like they tend to? Or is there a real problem here with the approach from Ledesma and Checo, where they're just trying to play the wrong game? They have these guys fired up to play this sort of nasty defensive game and put in cheap shots here and there, and they're just getting blown out, and their identity as an attacking, quick team is dissipating. Like, that's the question. Do you think that the Ledesma at the moment is a problem in the side, or is he the solution to the problem?
Yeah, it's a tough one to answer, because as you said, he'll have that game against the All Blacks from last year. That'll always speak to his credit. He fixed their scrum in advance of taking them to the last World Cup. He managed to do that successfully, which is in his wheelhouse, just given his playing reputation as well. And the scrum has been a positive for them in that subsequent thing.
And yet, didn't Lavanini come up with like a World Cup ending error again in the World Cup, and they got knocked out in the pool?
Yes.
And that Ledesma was in charge, and yet Lavanini's still in his squad making the same mistakes, and week in and week out, and still in the team. And now other guys, young guys who've come into the team like Kramer, are making those same mistakes.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it's
the general standard of play and their tendency to be easily tilted into ridiculous and stupid penalties, and just kind of a general kind of nasty streak to the way that they defend. Yeah, all of that would draw questions about just the team ethos at the minute. The other one I'm questioning is, like, what is Checa's influence on the team, if any? Like, I know there's a language barrier there to overcome, but like, it's tough to see some of the shape that considering he manufactured such beautiful offense with that Wallaby side going back to that 2015, like the way the lines they ran off
even some of the worst Wallaby teams, they could all put a phase or two together and strike, and you've seen precious little of that, granted against great defences and all, but
very little focus on doing that as well. And there's been a lot of like left and then right, one out, and like you're not even building towards one side, you're just going left and right and left and right and then dropping it. The skill set has been poor from them, which we would normally associate with like even Pumas teams that are outmatched scoring kind of nice sexy tries. That was what it used to be about, and it hasn't been under Ledesma, and it's definitely the primary work on. The glaring question is just, do you double down, and like we're halfway through that World Cup cycle now, it's time to commit. You either pull the trigger and go with the man, or you get someone in now when they have time to adjust it.
That's it. There was this time 4 years ago that the Springboks pulled the plug on Coetzee, because it was plainly evident that it wasn't working, and that his approach for this team was just wrong.
But then you do, as we go back with the caveats, like, it's not the first Argentina team to look brutal mid-World Cup cycle.
So is the question more, although granted the question we have in the title of this video is Ledesma the man, is the question more, if you're in a position with Argentina rugby, what do you need to hear or see from the coaching ticket to trust them over the next 2 years?
I would think skill set and discipline, almost like what you heard from Ian Foster, discipline first and foremost. Like, they have to recognise that these penalties aren't good plays, and not only are they not good plays, they're like destructively bad plays, destroying any chance you have of winning the game. And like the most worrying sign of watching this game, these last 6 games, these last few rounds of the Pumas games, is just how inevitable it felt from like 3 minutes in that they were not going to win this game by any, not even going to get close to winning these games. And that just very early on you saw that, because their offense just couldn't do anything. Like, there was no shape in the beginning. There was just no even speed to fold into a shape. They were like just walking up while the scrum half's waiting to pass, and the guys are just walking into a shape and defense is ready to eat them. In the last few weeks, you've seen them actually running on offense, and you've seen them trying to get a little bit, and the skill sets let them down, like, because they haven't been practicing it. The passes were high, low, behind thing, and as you say, top level defenses will eat them alive. The fact that they've been moving the ball a bit more is the bit of encouragement. I'd like to hear from Ledesma that are going to focus on discipline. Guys like Kramer, Lavanini, those cards that are just routine, need to make them not routine, whether that means getting those guys out or reining those guys in. You just like to hear the coaching ticket identify that as a massive problem, because that's what I'm looking at.
This time last year, I was very dodgy on Ian Foster, and I thought, listen, this is a continuation of the tail end of the Hansen era, which was not positive, that culminated in that disastrous England game. And I was like, and watching them in 2020, it was like, geez, they haven't done anything. And then the very first interview I heard of him, and I referenced this ad nauseum at this point, but the change in mindset was there instantly, and it was like, oh, yeah, no, this guy gets it.
Yeah.
And if Ledesma had a similar change in mindset, but I granted there's the language barrier, but the few interviews that I've seen with the translations from him, like, they haven't quite been that. They've been just a bit more gruff than that. And at the end of the day, he was a front row forward who valued set piece and slow play and etc. Like, I'm very unsure is my answer. I'm not sure if there's an obvious replacement for Ledesma, but I'm very unsure, and maybe I'll be proven wrong. Maybe it needs, like, maybe Czeka hasn't worked, you know, maybe they need to add something, maybe a Felipe Contapome or someone to come in and dial them into how beautiful Argentinian rugby can be and should be. You'll think of like Hernandez as well, like that back line that had Felipe and Hernandez in at 10 and 12. They moved the ball excellently, and they made it all the way to the World Cup semi-final, which is their best ever showing. Granted, they had a stellar set piece as well, but it wasn't all that they were, and they were at no point a dumb team. No.
And whereas at this juncture, they look the dumbest team in world rugby at the minute, and they really do. And that is a concern.
Apart from maybe Spain.
Maybe Spain in the
Spain
tier 2. Yes, the dumbest tier 1 side at the minute, though, by quite a distance, and that's a concern. And you have to level criticism at the coach, because that's where the ethos starts, really, isn't it? Yeah, no question. But anyway, those questions will have to be answered from the Pumas' point of view, looking into next year. And I'm glad that they'll finally get a break from all of this, and they do have a Northern Hemisphere tour. They play Italy, they play Ireland, they play France. I mean, they are like just on historical record when they're not particularly in the mood. They don't tend to come up north with much fire in their belly. True. So I would suggest that they're probably in for losses in Dublin and Paris, but we'll likely see off the Italians. Yes, I would imagine so. But that those games to follow, and then they'll take stock and reset, and maybe with the current brains trust they can turn it around. But there's no question that they are starting from a pretty low ebb after a poor season. Definitely true. Thank you very much for watching that video. If you're new here, please do like and subscribe and ring the bell so you get notified when we upload again. But mainly, please drop a comment down below. We enjoy hearing your thoughts on it. Thanks.